Morning all. I'd like to show you a fantastic game of Garry Kasparov played in the Malta Olympiad of 1980. Garry Kasparov in this Olympiad did exceptionally well, winning most of his games actually, winning +8 games, drawing 3 and just losing just 1. So let's have a look at this game played against Gert Henrik Ligterink, who was awarded the IM title 3 years prior to this game in 1977. He won the Dutch Championship in 1979, so a year before this game. Kasparov kicked off with d4. Gert played knight f6 after c4 e6. Now knight f3, avoiding the Nimzo Indian. We're in Queen's Indian territory. A solid choice, one would expect, for black. b6, this is a solid option. g3, bishop b7. Bishop g2, bishop e7. Knight c3. And now this is a very theoretical move, knight e4. It looks a bit unusual to be moving a piece twice in the opening, but it's got some very interesting ideas behind it. It's already threatening to damage white's structure. So Kasparov played bishop d2, which is actually the main move, offering the dark square bishop. Bishop f6, again, is the main move here, putting more pressure on the white centre. Castles, castles. Rook c1. So far so good. c5, again, a logical follow-up from black, putting more pressure on d4. It looks as though there's some congestion on this d file with this bishop on d2, so it seems quite natural to do this. d5, e takes, c takes. The pawn is always protected. After knight takes c3, then bishop takes c3, the pawn will be protected by the queen. We see actually black now going for this dark square bishop with knight takes d2. And now Kasparov really reinforces d5 with knight takes d2. But also, as well as the bishop protecting d5, the knight might come to either c4 or e4. d6. Now we see knight actually going to e4. Sometimes knight c4 has been played in this position as well. But knight e4 does eye the d6 pawn. It does sometimes threaten knight f6. So the queen's kind of having to protect, babysit this bishop on f6 at the moment. Usually players apparently just move it to e5. That's the main move actually, just to move the bishop to e5. There's quite a few games with that. Another popular alternative is bishop e7. We see in this game actually a deviation now off the rails a bit with rook e8. Now queen d2. Kasparov plays queen d2, and let's put on a Kibitzer here. I think white out of the opening stands okay, with certain amounts of pressure to look forward to. The pressure on d6 in particular looks interesting. I mean, there's also knight b5, which could be perceived as a major threat here now, just eyeing that d6 pawn. And in fact, black played a6, which seems to have that main intention of restricting knight b5 for attacking d6. Now Kasparov plays b4 in this position, and it looks like a pawn sacrifice, and you might wonder why, so let's have a quick look. If c takes b4, then white is actually doing quite well in this position by apparently taking on f6. Then if queen takes f6, knight e4, and there's some dangerous threats here like infiltrating via rook c7. Queen e7, queen takes b4. And in this resulting position, if we try and evaluate it, white seems to have good queenside pressure, concrete threats on d6, and on b6 to gain material back. So this kind of position, for example, looks quite promising for white. It has certain initiative. I don't think it matters about taking on d5 here. This is quite good as well for this diagonal, to have this diagonal celebrated by the bishop. Very, very good position for white. So this pawn wasn't taken. Black tried to keep solid. Black played bishop e7, trying to keep the structure solid. And now Kasparov plays b takes c5. Now if d takes, then we're walking into d6. It looks very unpleasant, d6. It might be tenable though, but black tried to avoid that scenario with b takes c5. And now queen f4, which at first doesn't do anything, but it's kind of prophylaxis against black's basic moves of trying to just develop normally with either knight d7 or queen c7. If those are perceived as threats, then queen f4 questions them a little bit. And we'll see why. If with knight d7, that's much clearer. It's not the game continuation, but we just play knight takes d6 here, and this is nice. There's no way of interfering with the protection of the knight. Queen takes f7 here. So natural development has been inhibited. Black tries to first protect d6, and I think this is the first serious issue which is created. Perhaps a solid continuation, rook a7. It looks awful to play rook a7, but technically, apparently, engines suggest that. In the game, we see queen c7, and it seems to be walking into some sort of issue, maybe, that the queens are staring at each other here. This pawn's sometimes going to be immobilized because of this fact. And we see, actually, Kasparov trying to tap into this pin, virtual pin of the d6 pawn, by playing knight a4. He's actually threatening now things like rook takes c5 potentially, or knight takes, or this one, because of that pin on the d pawn. And now again, normal development is stopped because of this. If black tries normal development with knight d7, then actually knight a takes c5 is very unpleasant, like this. This is unpleasant because of that pin on d6. So normal development has been inhibited. So black must have been feeling a bit concerned about this. He played actually queen a5, probably not. He didn't have the intention of moving his queen twice. The queen's not even threatening queen takes e4 here, because we'd have knight f6 check in that event, winning the queen. So there's no real threat on the knight. White just plays rook b1 here, attacking the bishop. So simultaneously offering a4, which is poisoned knight because of knight f6, just to show that, winning the queen there. But also you might think, well, hold on, what about this just taking the pawn? Well, taking the pawn was played. Bishop takes d5. But there's a nasty forcing move which needs to be calculated, and forcing moves can sometimes win games outright. Kasparov plays actually knight b6. And there's some difficulties here with this knight fork attacking a8 and d5. What else does black have but taking on e4? If he takes on a2, then he's just losing material. We just take this rook, and we've just won a piece, and the knight can just get back out, it would seem. And also knight takes d6 would protect the knight in any case. So let's go back. So in this position, black is virtually forced to give up that light square bishop. Bishop takes e4. Bishop takes e4, hitting the rook, and it's also simultaneously eyeing h7 here, which is a very important note. There's not too many moves for black. Black plays rook a7, and then we have a spectacular move, which is actually subject sometimes of chess puzzles, and I might try and put an interactive chess puzzle link for this position. I wonder if you can spot it. It's a fantastic move, very, very powerful. If I give you 10 seconds, you might want to pause the video. Okay, starting from now. White to play. Okay, knight c8. It's threatening immediately rook takes b8. It's also threatening knight takes a7. These are the two main threats. And you might think, well, can't the knight be taken? If the knight's taken, if rook takes c8, then queen f5, a double attack on the loose piece, and this one. Always when you see loose pieces, try and look for double attacks. But here it's really critical. This is really crushing this double attack in this position. If this occurred, nothing really black can do about this. He's threatened with a mate in 2 actually. If the rook moves, we just mate in 2. It's not just taking the pawn. Unfortunately, the bishop stops the king's exit there. So, in this position, black tried knight c6. And white now, okay, just takes on a7. So he's the exchange up at the very least. But even worse now, bishop d5. There's no opposing light square bishop. f7 is much more vulnerable than ever before. And there's also potential for rook b7 if needed. How does black actually defend f7? It's very, very tricky. Black actually resigned here. Let's try defending f7. If we play rook f8, then rook b7 is again a double attack on 2 loose pieces with f7 behind it. Knight c8. This is quite a crushing position though. We can at minimum play, for example, queen e4 hitting the bishop on e7. And if bishop f6, then we can crash through with rook takes f7 because of like this, for example, mating. So that's at minimum, but even stronger. I mean, there's even stronger moves available there. But you might think, well, okay, what if can't we defend in any other way? Actually, there's no other way because the pawn's pinned. If king h8, we just take on f7. And black's falling to bits, having to protect like this. And rook b7 again, crashing through. Black's going to be totally overloaded soon after bishop e6, threatening to just take on c8, which is protecting e7. If, for example, bishop f8, then queen g8 mate. So anyway, quite a crushing game. Bishop d5, black resigned. One of the many crushing games. It seems both Kasparov and Tao seem absolutely inspired players when it comes to Olympiads, mowing down opponents with very, very aggressive, precise chess. I hope you enjoyed this game. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.